Today we are doing 10.7. This is our third day of this and final day of looking at comparing populations. So again, just as a reminder, we're looking at our data sets. We're looking at the graphs to see if they're symmetrical or skewed. If they are symmetrical, we are going to find the mean and MAD to compare them. If they are skewed, then we are going to find the median and the IQR to compare them. So if we take a minute to look at our dot plots here, it says the dot plot shows the height of boys and girls in a class. So we look at the dot plots one at a time to see if they're symmetrical or skewed. So for symmetrical, you have to imagine it folded in half and things matching up. So if I have the girls, I'm going to ignore the boys graph right now. I'm just going to look at the girls graph. So here's the middle of that graph. I've got 3 points to the left, 3 points to the right. That would perfectly match if folded. 1 point to the left, 1 point to the right. That would perfectly match if it was folded. So girls is perfectly symmetrical. Let's take a look at the boys. So the center of the boys' data is right here. If we look to the left, we've got 2 points, 2 to the right. That matches perfectly. 2 to the left, 2 to the right. That matches perfectly. 1 to the left, 1 to the right. So for both of those, we have perfectly even shapes on both sides. So this is a perfectly symmetrical one, which is actually pretty rare to have something that is perfectly symmetrical. So we are going to be finding our mean and our MAD for these two dot plots. So if you take a look here, I went ahead and found the mean and the MAD for the girls. So for the girls, I added all of the numbers for each point. So for this first one here, that would be worth 63. I had a 64, 64, 64, 65, 65, 65, 65, 66, 66, 66, and 67. So when I added those all together, I got 780. I divided by 12 and I got 65. So that was my mean. Then the next step was to find our MAD. So to do that, I had to subtract each one of those numbers with 65. Those are the numbers that you see written up here in red. So 65 minus 63 is 2, 65 minus 64 is 1, and so on. All of those are subtracted with 65. And then I added those numbers together. I got 10. I divided by 12, and then I got 83 hundredths with the 3 repeating. I divided by 12 there because I still had 12 numbers, even though it looks like I have fewer numbers there. I actually have 12 points. Okay, so take a minute, go ahead and pause the video, and you're going to finish this problem for the parts that we haven't done. So you'll need to do the mean and the MAD for the boys. You'll need to write a sentence to compare the populations, and then you're going to need to express the difference in the measures of center as a multiple of the measure of variation. Remember, difference means subtract. Subtract your measures of center, that's your mean. And then the multiple of means we're going to be dividing by the MAD. Go ahead and pause your video now and try this problem. Okay, let's go ahead and check to see if your answers are correct. All right, so here's the rest of the work filled in for this problem here. So I've got my boys' mean was 69. The MAD, you should have gotten 1 and 4/10. Again, you have to subtract each number with 69. Add up all of those values, so 3 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1, and so on. Add them all together, divide by the number of numbers. On this one, it's 13. And then you need to have a sentence to compare. So boys have higher mean and MAD. Then we express the difference in the measures of center as a multiple measure of variation. I picked the second one. You could have picked the first one. It doesn't really matter which MAD we use. So we subtract 69 minus 65 is 4, and then we divide by our MAD of 1.4, and I got 2 and 86 hundredths. If you divide it by 0.83 repeating, then you would have a slightly larger value. Again, that tells us how much overlap. 2 and 86 hundredths is a little bit bigger than some of the other ones we've seen in the past, and that's because these graphs don't overlap very much. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next problem. So here it says the box and whisker plots show the number of daily participants in 2 adventure groups. We have treetop tours, we have zip adventures. Now on the treetop tours, this particular box and whisker was designed with this little star here instead of the whisker. That's one way you can show on a box and whisker plot that there's an outlier. There was one day that Treetop Tours had, it looks like maybe 125 people, and every other day it was at 100, maybe slightly bigger than 100 or less. So sometimes you'll see that with a box and whisker, sometimes you'll just see the whisker all the way out to the top. And then we have Zip Adventures. So we're looking at these to see if they're symmetrical or skewed. Zip Adventures looks very symmetrical here. Treetop Tours, if we consider this outlier and we know it's an outlier, anytime you have an outlier, that's going to mean that you have a data set that's skewed. That outlier is going to make our mean much, much greater and not be as accurate as a way to compare them than our medians for this one. So we're going to be finding the median and the IQR. All right, so you need to figure out the rest of this problem. So we're going to compare the populations using measure of center and variation. You need to find the median and the IQR for each one. Remember, median is the line in the middle of the box plot. IQR means we're subtracting the numbers that are on the ends of the box plot. If you're not sure what numbers they are, then you can just kind of estimate. And then you need to write a sentence to compare the populations using your measures of center and variation. And then you need to express the difference in the measures of center as a multiple of the measure of variation. Go ahead and pause the video and finish this problem. Okay, let's go ahead and check to see if your answers are correct. So for the Treetop Tours, median was 70. The IQR, I subtracted 80 minus 50 and I got 30. For Zip Adventures, our median was 50. I subtracted 60 minus 40 and got 20. And then for my comparison statements over here, Treetop Tours has a higher median and IQR, so more participants overall. And greater variation too, more spread out than the Zip Adventures. And then for B, express the difference in the measures of center as a multiple of the measure of variation. You subtract your means, so 70 minus 50 is 20. And then you could have divided by 20 or 30. Either would have been fine. I chose 20 because 20 divided by 20 is 1, and that's pretty easy division. But you could have also done 20 divided by 30, which is our other IQR. That would have given you 6/10 repeating, and that would also be a good number. This number is somewhat low. It tells us there's a good amount of overlap in between the two graphs.